Lukashenko says he didn't want to go to this election. This whole thing feels like a farce. There were a lot of statements about Ukraine. Election day is happening today in Belarus. Let's talk about the semblance of an election right now. I, Iryna Uzlova, and with us Pavlo Latushko, Deputy Head of the United Transition Cabinet and Head of the People's Anti-Crisis Office of Belarus. Pavel, hello. Lukashenko voted today, said the elections should be open, and added that he didn't want to go to the polls, but they dragged him there. Let's listen to it and discuss how it all ends. We all realize I'm not forever. And of course, some will sneer or distort, but I don't care, because here sits Natalia Ivanovna, a member of the Security Council. I did not want to go to this election. And a few months ago, at the last Security Council, Natalia Ivanovna and other people addressed this issue. I'd say, how much is too much? It's been 30 years, and it's still the same situation, like no one is there. Everyone is laughing, but Lukashenko's dog was not laughing. He didn't want to, but she wanted to, and marked the polling station where Lukashenko voted for everyone. Pavel, maybe he voted for Putin. Elections in Belarus have been out of the question for a long time. When was the last time you smelled an election? By the way, he spoiled the ballot if he voted for everyone. In Belarus, this is a criminal offense. Maybe he himself would have instructed to initiate proceedings. This time, he doesn't seem to be bothering to create the illusion of an election. All previous campaigns have always included members of the opposition. He imprisoned, beat, tortured, threw out of the country, but all election campaigns ended badly for those who went against him. Now, he has appointed himself conditional opponents, as former Lithuanian Foreign Minister Landsbergis pointed out. He took all these pseudo-candidates and hung Lukashenko's portrait. That's why it looks like this. He doesn't bother. Repression continues. There are no opposition parties or independent media. What kind of elections are we talking about? He says he didn't want to go, and Kochanova is trying to implicate him. It's like a child's game of daisies. Love it, don't love it, he wants to show it. You want it, you go. It's a game for those who don't understand politics. I'm sure he brought it up at the Security Council to test Kachanova's reaction. What if Natalia Vladimirovna says, "Thank you for finding it"? Suddenly, Kachanova will say, "Alexander Grigorievich, let's think about a successor." Of course, he provoked this situation. At the meeting, everyone should say, "Alexander Grigorievich, how can we do without you?" It's a psychological trick to test the loyalty of the environment. I'm an optimist by nature, but here I'm a pessimist. This tired man will only leave power when he is taken out. Or as a last resort, if he can't drive, he will be wheeled around in a wheelchair. Then he will pass the power to his son. He said he was ready to find a successor among the top officials. He doesn't trust anyone and is fully aware of it. The example of Kazakhstan, as soon as a successor appears, one can lose everything, and in the worst case go to jail or flee to Russia or the UAE, where he transferred his money. Pavel Lukashenko commented on the transfer of power to his son. He added that it's too early for 2030. Lukashenko said it is necessary to prepare a new generation for the future presidency, not his sons, but younger generation from governors and ministers. I was talking about the generation, not the staff. Who will it be, the new generation? Perhaps they are not preparing anyone, but Lukashenko must have guarantees that he will not be prosecuted for crimes against the Belarusian people and aggression against Ukraine. For safeguards, he must control the power apparatus. If he moves to the chairmanship, giving up the presidency, he will lose direct control of the security apparatus. This is not a problem for Lukashenko. He can change the constitution at will and put a successor he trusts 100%. Kolya Lukashenko says, "My dad is a great man. I'm the most like my dad out of all three sons." Kolya hints that he's great too, but not that great yet. I guess in his mind, 20 years is still young. But already such notes are appearing. He is shown at concerts, interviewed. He's trying to take away the informational punch, though I haven't heard his entire conference. Lots of action today, with Cole's kick shifting to a wide range of officials. Lukashenko, saying he doesn't care about Western sanctions, called it all fairy tales for the poor.
Говоря о наказании его и возможном также санкционном давлении со стороны Запада, Лукашенко, который проголосовал за всех и за всех хороших, как он думает, против всего плохого, заявил, что ему фиолетово на реакцию Запада.
The slang for the president of the country is, to put it mildly, inappropriate, but the style is clearly inspired by the Leningrad underbelly. Lukashenko called the European Parliament resolution on the elections in Belarus a bowing to Washington. What should be the reaction of the West? Because behind the tweets lies the horror of a situation where Lukashenko is once again cementing power. The West's reaction is already there. For the first time in the history of Belarus, the West expressed its position even before the day of no elections. The European Parliament resolution declares non-recognition of the elections since January 26. Second, a number of countries and parliaments, including the Polish Senate, have not recognized him as president since January 26. Similar statements were made by the Latvian parliament, the head of the Lithuanian parliament, many foreign ministers, and the EU High Commissioner. Lukashenko is not recognized as president due to the election. If he doesn't care, then, as Trump said, we offer in a nice way. If Lukashenko continues to ignore the West and his policy of repression and support for Russia, tough sanctions and pressure will follow. It is necessary to maintain the approach. Lukashenko understands only the language of force, and this force should be strengthened. We must realize that Lukashenko is a hostage. Trump doesn't know who Lukashenko is and doesn't want to know. I'm sure it all depends on the negotiations. He's hostage to the situation. I emphasize, this is Ukraine-Russia, not the United States-Russia, as is often presented in the information field. The situation is incomprehensible, to put it diplomatically. The U.S. is a major ally of Ukraine. It's important that they support Ukraine, but it's a negotiation, if there is to be a negotiation. The outcome of the talks will determine future Western policy, including the issue of sanctions. If Russia continues to control the occupied territories, on what basis can sanctions be lifted? For stopping the aggression. Lukashenko is a hostage to the situation. Decisions on Russia will entail decisions on Lukashenko as well. To lift the sanctions, Lukashenko must intensify repression and release political prisoners. Then the human rights sanctions will be lifted, and he knows that better than anyone, because he is the best expert. He's the best at sanctions policy. Large-scale sanctions have been imposed on Lukashenko 5 times, but he has always unilaterally torn up the treaty. When the obscurantism began in 2020, I suggested that the West simply return all 5 sanctions. He broke the treaty by ending repression and promising liberalization. He broke his commitment. All sanctions are returned. Then this policy will have an effect. We appeal to the partners. We are often stymied by misunderstandings. Will is most important. If there were more sanctions against Lukashenko, he would not have continued the repression, pseudo-elections, and other such steps. Lukashenko repeatedly mentioned Trump going from extreme to extreme. You have to stop focusing on him. We don't expect anything from the U.S. Europe can go its own way. If Trump wants a Nobel Prize, he should ask Lukashenko, who supports it. At first, Lukashenko criticized Trump, but then he realized that he had survived the attack and survived just like Putin. Lukashenko believes that the U.S. will not satisfy the aspirations of the Russian people, but Trump may make an illogical but, in his opinion, logical decision. Let's hear what he has to say. Make a decision that seems illogical and unexpected. We are waiting for him to make an illogical decision on Ukraine. By the logic and criteria for resolving such issues, the Americans will not meet the demands of the Russians, the people, and the president. It's not in their best interest, so they have to act on established principles. But Trump is unpredictable. He can act unexpectedly and fulfill his promise of peace. He sees himself as the Messiah chosen to bring peace. He's committed to it and very steadfast, hasn't performed, but always stays true. Everyone on the airwaves right now is laughing their asses off at this. Really, a comedian. This is the 3rd time I've listened to these snippets. I can't stop. It's a serious topic, but it's the way it's presented. What reality? He's asking a contradictory test. This is where Kremlin propaganda tries to suck up to Trump. On the one hand, he says the Americans won't satisfy Russia's ambitions. He argues Trump could make an unconventional decision. He's trying to please both sides. The main problem is Russia's actions, not what the U.S. does or does not do, because Russia initiated the aggression. Russia is making demands that violate international law in a harsh way. They should back down from those positions and stop violating international law. Americans are not catering to Russian ambitions. It means giving Ukraine to Russia to be in its sphere of influence. He's trying to play along if negotiations don't produce results. He did a stupid thing by talking about Trump, although I'm trying to reassure him it's not getting through. He said something stupid, offending Biden and Kamala Harris, leaving her to be torn about Trump. Now, Biden and Harris have gotten good, despite the sanctions and hardline stance against him. Now, Trump is bad, and the main problem is the lack of continuity of power, as Lukashenko dreams of. I don't believe in that option, but he's trying to sell the thesis. I created Lukashism, socialism, communism, Nazism, fascism. I want to pass my Lukasism down a generation, and Trump came along and decided to pass new executive orders instead of continuing Biden's policies. This is not an assessment of Trump's actions, but of his inner fear. I reply, as soon as you are out of office, Lukashism will end at once. No matter who it will be, even if Kolya Lukashenko theoretically ends up in power, Lukashism will be over. I cannot imagine such a terrible policy of Lukashenko based on lies, repression, and genocide of his own people. 1,000 people are almost with us. Do you think talking about the light at the end of the tunnel in the Russian-Ukrainian war before the end of the year, mentioning the Istanbul agreements, do you think these phantom pains of the past lead nowhere? Despite the lack of agreements, as Zelenskyy reported in Davos, Putin is suffering from a sore that Lukashenko is picking up. Is he trying to insert himself into the negotiation process by repeating this? Or how can Putin use him in escalation or negotiation? Lukashenko wants to restore subjectivity. This whole catastrophe around elections is the main goal of restoring subjectivity. He wants to heal the internal trauma when most Belarusians said, "Go away, Sasha, we're sick of you." He wants to convince himself and the elites that the people believed him again, that those who came out against him were wrong, bowed down and apologized. The goal is to achieve subjectivity through pseudo-company. We reject both theses. There has never been an international subjectivity. The election hasn't happened yet, but he's already been unrecognized. Some countries, such as Hungary, China, and Russia, will immediately congratulate the election, such as North Korea. The status quo must be maintained. His goal is to restore subjectivity, to try to mediate the negotiations. It's not just subjectivity. He becomes a handshake. Guests in Belarus will be forced to shake his hand. It's his ultimate dream, which he talks about all the time. Putin doesn't need him as a second vote. If Putin sits down to negotiate, why do they need Lukashenko? So Putin can think while Lukashenko is talking. Putin is not sitting alone, but with Lukashenko. This is important. If the negotiations fail, Russia will need Lukashenko again. And one should have no illusions here. Lukashenko is an enemy of Ukraine. This man will grant Belarus territory again if the Russians want it. It guarantees nothing and has no subjectivity in dealing with Russia. He was labeled in the Kremlin with the Order of St. Andrew. That's the label he walks around with. And if he needs to, he will do anything to Lukashenko. Only the Belarusian people can stop it. The main problem is how to motivate Belarusians and keep faith in democracy. Independence is not guaranteed by Lukashenko, only by the people. Those are big buzzwords. We have to work every day to keep the Belarusians from changing their point of view. They are the only ones who can stop the war. Lukashenko said Russia never gave Crimea to Ukraine. Russia has squeezed Belarus from the Belarusians. He's trying to prove that he has retained his independence. He blames Ukraine and claims that democracy in Lithuania led to this. Beggar Lithuania, I've been there. It was beautiful during Soviet times and now it's horrible. He says they're almost starving in Germany. He says democracy in Ukraine has led to this. What position is he taking? He became an aggressor by bringing war to Ukraine with Russia, and now he says, look, I have peace. How about saying thank you to Ukraine, its people, and leadership for peace? Because the Ukrainians had the right to respond, right? You brought war to a country that wants to live in a democracy, and now you tell me what it leads to. I am sure that our audience and the majority in Belarus understand this. We have a problem. Lukashenko manages to sell Belarusians the idea that the world is only because of him. It is a challenge for democratic forces and the media to convey that peace was ensured by the Belarusian people, not Lukashenko. The army didn't go to Ukraine because Lukashenko conducted a sociological poll among the military. The military did not want to fight. And that's why he didn't send troops. The military would have gotten hit by the Ukrainian army. There would have been a coup in Belarus. Lukashenko would have lost office. He was scared of it, not because he loves Ukraine or didn't want war. He's afraid of losing his position. He doesn't think about interests of people. He was whipping Putin up for war, hoping Putin would forget his commitment once it started. He didn't get behind the constitutional changes. Why would he want that second job? Putin told him to go for transit, but he turned away from the war. Lukashenko became useful in the war, and Putin said, well done, he fulfilled his obligations. What am I going to throw at you now? Definitely. Lukashenko today recalled the beginning of a full-scale war, commenting on the words of Zelenskyy, who said that Lukashenko offered, "You want to bomb." Lukashenko thinks Zelenskyy is a showman if we think he is a stand-up comedian. We'll hear more and come back. I suggested he hit the Mozyr refinery. When I heard that, I felt sick to my stomach, and it was totally unacceptable. KGB. Suggest that Zelenskyy hit our refinery, the best refinery we have recently modernized, and in which we have invested a huge amount of money. Why would you say that? You're a bad showman. You're not even Trump. I could ask him to hit the plant, but it wouldn't be to my advantage, and I'd have to respond. I never wanted this war and did everything I could to keep it from happening. How many lies are there? And how can Putin use Mozyr refinery, given the strikes on Russia's oil infrastructure facilities? Or does he use it as he sees fit?
Во-первых, не Луке судить о президенте Украины. Это вообще человек недостойный того, чтобы давать оценки президенту Украины, не ему влазить в дела Украины.
There is a lie in every word here. This man brought the Russian army to Belarus and opened border crossings. We discussed that Lukashenko is trying to sell the thesis that the Russians were returning from exercises. I'm not going to tell them how to get back to the Far East. This man is trying to prove that, as president of Belarus, he was sitting watching CNN when barriers were raised at border crossings and Russian tanks were entering Chernihiv region.
В прямом эфире, когда на белорусских пограничных переходах поднимались шлагбаумы и русские танки входили в Черниговскую область.
He was just a spectator. Where's his subjectivity? If he didn't want war, why did he agree to open the barriers at the border crossing? You're supposed to put troops out and say, Putin, don't do this. What do you mean you didn't want to? You provided all the infrastructure and facilities for aggression. How many exercises and mobilized Russians were there in Belarus? All firing ranges were working. Training was conducted for Russian soldiers who went to kill Ukrainians. You're a liar when airfields were operating, planes were launching, and strikes were being launched against Ukraine. I didn't want a war. He's lying in every word. Unfortunately, if they rebroadcast these lies, someone may mistake them for the truth, as in Ukraine. Lukashenko really didn't want war. He should probably be given flowers and the title of hero of Ukraine for that. When speaking about Lukashenko, rely only on actions. He made the aggression. He should be held accountable for that. Everything else is just talk. He says one thing, then another. He praised Trump, but when he saw him, he said, showman Zelenskyy wasn't even like Trump. So Zelenskyy is bad, but Trump is even worse, but a little less so. So make up your mind, is Trump your good guy or bad guy? When a man talks a lot, verbiage starts and he gets confused in his testimony. It would be good for him to testify in The Hague. I didn't get who he was talking good and bad about either. Now I understand. Pavel, thank you. Thank you for your explanations, stance, and working to make sure the war criminals answer for their crimes in The Hague. Until we meet again, take care. High Viva Belarus without Lukashenko. Pavlo Latushko, Deputy Head of the Joint Transition Cabinet, Head of the People's Anti-Crisis Administration of Belarus. More than 5,000